So far in this course, we've been exploring individual elements of sustainable living, like high-performance buildings, renewable energy systems, and local food production. But these elements don't exist on their own. They're embedded in a settlement pattern: rural, urban, suburban, village, and city. Cities are the biggest things that people make. Redesigning them as eco-cities is one of the biggest factors in global sustainability and in improving human welfare. In this lecture, we'll explore how these settlement patterns affect sustainability. We'll explore eco-city design. Settlement patterns in city design define transportation requirements, and transportation system decisions in turn define options for city design. We'll also look at transportation alternatives. In the past, cities were designed around the size and velocity of the human, and today's best cities, like Florence, Italy, still are. Most of today's cities, however, are designed around the size and velocity of the automobile, which has huge consequences for sustainability. By design, housing, shopping, work, education, and recreation are all segregated in separate districts, requiring cars to access them. Cars, however energy efficient, and regardless of the fuel you use, are 10 times faster and 10 or 20 times larger than humans. So the infrastructure required to accommodate cars is inherently in conflict with human scale, human-centered urban design. In a society designed around the car, large segments of the population are disenfranchised. The young, the elderly, the sick, the poor, the blind, these are just a few categories that can't participate directly in car culture. Better and better cars allow us to push suburban sprawl further and further out. So the better car can often make for the worst city. As an example, look at Los Angeles. 50 years ago, Los Angeles was choking in air pollution caused by automobiles. We solved the problem by fixing cars rather than fixing the city, using a technological fix rather than a comprehensive design solution. Fixing cars meant adding catalytic converters and other pollution control devices to individual cars. This was remarkably successful in addressing smog. Today, in 2014, even with many more cars, the air is much cleaner in LA than it was then. Other cities were then able to emulate LA in urban sprawl design. But we contributed to another set of problems by making it tenable to continue using cars on a large scale: global warming. Transportation emissions are responsible for 30% of US greenhouse gas emissions, and 60% of that comes from cars and light trucks. Cars cause a lot of damage, destruction, and death. They pollute, they are noisy, they take up a lot of space, time, and money, they destroy natural beauty, and they are a major cause of death for humans and other animals. They have taken natural landscapes and turned them into cement jungles. Yet we still idolize them, and we have designed our cities to prove how much we worship them. Advertising has encouraged us to turn our cars into status symbols. So instead of designing cities around community and accessibility, cities are designed to permit a car to go anywhere. The more efficient the car, the more justified we can feel for driving more. Better cars lead to more driving. But is that really what we want? What we need? Now don't get me wrong here. If we drive, we should drive the best, greenest cars we can, powered by renewable energy sources. And we can't put people in environments that were designed for cars and take away the cars. Later in this lecture, we'll talk about better design for cars. Improving cars and making better buildings are still good things to do, but we shouldn't let that get in the way of the more fundamental work of reimagining and redesigning their context, the city. What's an alternative to making better cars? Well, we need to design cities from the ground up for people rather than cars. Cities can be designed so that basic human needs like food, education, jobs, entertainment, and access to nature can be accessed without cars. Eco-city theorist and designer Richard Register calls this access by proximity, making the necessities and niceties of everyday life accessible by walking or biking. Another element of eco-city design is to rethink single-family home design. It's difficult to get the kind of density needed for access by proximity in a car-free environment if everyone has a suburban-style single-family home. In addition, larger multifamily buildings have a more efficient shape than single-family homes, with less heat-losing surface area needed to enclose a given amount of floor space. Access by proximity is made easier if cities are built up instead of out, in 3 dimensions rather than 2. It's interesting to note that there are not any 2-dimensional living creatures. Nature creates life in 3 dimensions with lots of clever tricks, like crenellated and folded brain tissue to create access by proximity. The metaphor for the city has been the city as a machine, or as the French architect and city planner Le Corbusier said, a machine for living. The metaphor for the eco-city is the city as a living organism, powered by solar energy, with a metabolism that fits within ecological cycles. Richard Register has created a series of images that illustrates one idea for transformation from big box, car-centric design to eco-city. Here's the conventional city, based around cars and the big box store. The first stages of redevelopment look pretty similar to redevelopment of any type, but you can see that the street is being dug out in what looks like the shape of a waterway. The third drawing shows what the new eco-city looks like after the transformation. It's a complex, multi-use, multi-story environment. Nature is an integral part of the design, with a restored creek, which had been previously buried under the street and has been brought back to the surface. There are trees on the upper floors of the buildings. There are multi-level pedestrian bridges connecting different elevations. This looks like an interesting, fun, and functional place. Of course, there are many ways in which the eco-city idea could find form. This is just to get you thinking about the possibilities. When human habitats are denser, then there's more land left for nature. Unmediated nature experiences and wildness can be close to cities, just a few minutes walking or by bike. Typically, cities are designed with consideration for buildings first and for the space between buildings last or not at all. Jan Gehl, a Copenhagen-based city designer and author of the books Life Between Buildings and Cities for People, recommends the following order for thinking about city design. First, life, designed for people in convivial human interaction rather than cars. Next, space. Consider the use of public spaces and the space between buildings. And finally, buildings. Consider how buildings fit into space and life. Here are the principles of eco-city design developed by my colleague Richard Register, author of the book Eco-Cities and founder of the nonprofit Eco-City Builders. Many of the ideas in this lecture come from my discussions with Richard. Build the city the living system that it is. Put waste into cycles, integrate food production, power it using solar energy, and harvest rainwater. The form is a well-integrated, complex 3-dimensional shape, facilitating access by proximity. The design metaphor is living systems rather than the machine. Make the city's function fit within the patterns of evolution. Go beyond sustainability to regeneration of natural systems in the human spirit. Support and express creativity and compassion. As the universe evolves, its entities like stars and planets spawn beings like animals and plants. Some of these invent wings like those of insects, bats, and birds that never were before. And so people invent, among other things, justice, truth, beauty, and the techniques of law, philosophy, and art to embody them. These and future inventions not yet imagined are what cities should support. Cities can be a powerful force for human cultural evolution. Start with a foundation of land use planning that supports the eco-city. Land use pattern should support the healthy anatomy of the whole eco-city. Land use infrastructure has to be ecologically tuned from the start. Reverse the transportation hierarchy. Transportation choices support or subvert much of what is healthy about cities. Plan for pedestrians first, followed in order by bikes, rail, on-road buses or flexible transit, cars and trucks. Generally, we plan for those first, and notice in this hierarchy it's last. Build soils and enhance biodiversity. Compost and cycle organic wastes. In Havana, Cuba, 90% of the city's fresh produce comes from local urban gardens and farms. It is grown organically with fertilizers supplied by composting waste organic matter from the city. In 2009, there were 85,000 acres of land being used for agricultural production in Havana, with more than 44,000 people employed. We could create millions of new farmers in America with urban and peri-urban farming. We're used to urban infrastructure that doesn't work. The existing urban infrastructure makes it difficult to imagine something different. To paraphrase Winston Churchill, first we shape cities, then they shape us. Making these kinds of complex urban environments the most attractive places for people to live, rather than the least attractive places, is a central challenge for sustainability. City design has an impact on the efficacy of green technologies and the parameters of personal choice. Let's look at how city infrastructure and land use decision affect ecological impact and ecological footprint. What's the greenest place in the US? Well, even though New York City is not an eco-city, David Owen, in his book Green Metropolis, contrasts Vermont and New York and argues that New York is the greenest place to live in America. Why? Well, because it's compact and most people live in smaller apartments that are energy efficient by virtue of their small size and shared walls. The key to New York City's relative environmental benignity is the very thing that to most Americans make it appear to be an ecological nightmare: its extreme compactness. Moving people and their daily destinations close together reduces their need for automobiles, makes efficient public transit possible, and restores walking as a viable form of transportation. Dense urban cores are among the few places left in America where people still routinely go around on foot. In the suburbs, you seldom see anyone walking who is actually traveling to a destination, rather than merely moving between a building and a vehicle or trying to lose weight. But New York is not an eco-city. It's efficient because of its compactness, but much could be added by rethinking New York on eco-city principles. Eco-cities go beyond compactness to build in sustainability from the start, providing the proper substrate for the application of green technologies and design strategies. Adding eco-city design to a place like New York City is a way to make change on a large scale, complementing the sustainability efforts we make with our personal choices. How can we transition from current urban infrastructures to eco-cities? Well, we've got to think about new eco-city infrastructure, and we've got to think about retrofitting the old infrastructure. These are mostly long-term, multi-generational projects, like building a medieval cathedral. There are several problems with making the eco-city vision the rule rather than the exception. First, in America, we've got a dearth of inspiring good examples of car-free design. Many of them are in places around the world that few Americans have visited. In a minute, I'll show you examples of popular vacation destinations that were built before cars and maintain a pedestrian focus. Second, eco-cities are inherently large-scale undertakings, mostly beyond what a person can do on his or her own. And third, large, complex public infrastructure tasks require the leadership of government. And in the US, there has been a focus on individual solutions for sustainability, which are important and necessary, but not sufficient in dealing with the biggest things that people collectively make: cities and their corresponding transportation infrastructure. A little more than 100 years ago, all cities were car-free. The few cities that still are, like Florence, Italy, are some of the most popular tourist destinations in the world. We're looking to learn from the past, not recreate it. I've shown you these images so that you can see that dense human settlements can be very attractive places to live. What are some modern experiments in eco-city design? Well, one of the most ambitious is Arcosanti, designed by Paulo Soleri. Paulo Soleri was a student of Frank Lloyd Wright, who had a vision for cities and ecology living in harmony, which he called arcology, a combination of architecture and ecology. He looked at cities as centers of innovation and evolution of the arts, culture, science, and technology, as centers of human progress. He felt city design could either enhance this evolutionary trend or stifle it. His goal was to discover those design elements that would bring out the best of humanity through city design. He designed massive arcologies, eco-cities to house millions of people. In 1970, Paulo began building a new city called Arcosanti in the desert about an hour north of Phoenix. His goal was to build an eco-city for 5,000 people on 25 acres. He taught and influenced generations of architects and urban designers who studied and worked with him there to build the town. Arcosanti continues to offer 5-week internships on eco-city design and construction, and as of 2012, more than 7,000 have taken the workshop. Curitiba, Brazil, under the direction of Jamie Lerner and others, became one of the most advanced ecological cities in the world. As Bill McKibben notes in his article exploring sustainability in Curitiba, the Brazilian city of Curitiba is a global model for development that both respects the earth and delights its inhabitants. Curitiba is an example of how sustainability is a key to a better way of life. Curitiba has built parks instead of canals to reduce flooding, used parks to make the city more livable. It pedestrianized the downtown area. They invented and built bus rapid transit, a bus system that works like light rail systems, but is 10 times cheaper and 100 times cheaper than a subway. They started a massive recycling scheme that included giving people bus tokens in return for waste. The story of the creation of the pedestrian area is a great example for showing us the challenge of moving to a car-free infrastructure and an innovative solution. Lerner wanted to create a pedestrian mall in the center of the city as an emblem of his drive for a human-scale city. And he knew that he would be in for a big fight with store owners unfamiliar with the concept. He and his public works office carefully planned to do the work, which would normally take a month or more, over just one weekend. The pedestrian mall was an immediate success. By midday on the Monday after the mall was created, store owners who had been threatening legal action were petitioning the mayor to extend the mall. The next weekend, when offended members of the local automobile club threatened to reclaim the street by driving their cars down it, Lerner didn't call out the police. Instead, he had city workers lay down strips of paper the length of the mall. When the auto club arrived, its members found dozens of children sitting on the former street painting pictures. The transformation of Curitiba had begun. 99% of Curitibans are happy with their city and wouldn't live anywhere else. Even 70% of the people who live in Sao Paulo would rather live in Curitiba. And they did all this with an average annual income of $2,500 per year. Curitiba proves eco-cities and sustainability are not just for wealthy societies. In my town, there is only one pedestrian street. It's the most photographed place in the whole town. Despite this, there is fierce opposition to expanding the car-free area. Efforts at building eco-cities will be mostly long-term efforts. In the meantime, we can spark public imagination by building what Richard Register calls eco-city fractals, small pieces of eco-cities that can serve to help people imagine what entire eco-cities could be like. Villa Verde, which opened in the Bronx, New York in 2012, is an example of an eco-city fractal. It's a $100 million project with 500 residents, rooftop veggie gardens and fruit trees, access by proximity, and renewable energy. The building is tall on the north side and steps down as it goes further south. This optimizes the availability of solar energy for the complex. Other strategies that some communities have explored to transition from car-centric to people-centric design are placemaking and traffic calming. City Repair, a Portland, Oregon nonprofit, has created a process for making public spaces more convivial called placemaking. Placemaking is a process for getting neighbors together to imagine and design a better public space and then create it. It can involve elements like painting colorful designs on intersections, installing simple outdoor book exchange boxes, benches, and public tea stations. Placemaking was first done as a below-the-radar guerrilla action, but is now approved by Portland city government and has spread to other cities. City Repair hosts the Village Building Convergence, an annual conference in Portland, Oregon, featuring a hands-on approach to sustainable city design. There are a wide range of innovative design ideas for slowing traffic and giving preference to pedestrians, like Woonerven in the Netherlands and the shared space intersection designs inspired by Hans Monderman. Woonerven were developed in Holland to slow traffic on small streets in residential neighborhoods. They push unexpected elements like tables to the edge of the street and sometimes even into the street, forcing drivers to slow down and be more aware. Monderman is an innovative Dutch traffic engineer that creates intersections that merge pedestrians, bikes, and cars all into the same system. His intersections are so well designed that they don't need street signs or traffic signals. In fact, that's one of the ways that they work. No street signs or signals force cars to slow down and be aware of the pedestrians and bikes that share the road with them. Now this sounds dangerous, but research shows that Monderman-style shared space intersections are safer than conventional intersections. We don't have time in this lecture to go into the details, but I encourage those who are interested in eco-city design to explore these ideas for traffic calming further. We've explored the drawbacks of car-based city design, but in most cities today, we still need to use cars. Let's look at some car options we can use today. There is a revolution in car design going on. Quality electric cars are available from major manufacturers. In 2014, electric car range is 80 to 100 miles, adequate for most commutes and around town driving. Many people find that acceleration and overall driving experience is actually superior to gas vehicles. Bill Hurlin, a resident in Abundance Eco Village, says that his electric car is the best car he has ever owned. Hybrid cars combine a conventional gas or diesel engine with an electric motor generator and batteries. This combination allows the conventional engine to run at higher efficiencies, dramatically increasing miles per gallon. One of the most popular hybrids gets 51 miles highway, 48 city miles per gallon. Most manufacturers have hybrid models available. The generator and batteries work with the conventional engine to convert energy normally wasted during coasting and braking into electricity, which is stored in a battery until needed by the electric motor. The electric motor is used to assist the engine when accelerating or hill climbing and in low-speed driving conditions where internal combustion engines are least efficient. Hybrids automatically shut off the engine when the vehicle comes to a stop and restart it when the accelerator is pressed. This prevents wasted energy from idling. Hybrids also are typically lower in weight and they have better aerodynamics, which helps fuel economy. Now, plug-in hybrids offer the ability to drive on electric power only. You can use the car as an electric car and plug it in to recharge it. Running on electric power from the grid is typically 1/4 the cost of driving using gasoline. And if you don't plug it in, you can still use the car in conventional hybrid mode using gasoline. Range as an electric vehicle varies from about 11 to 38 miles. On the cutting edge of vehicle performance is a hybrid that gets 261 miles per gallon from its hybrid diesel-electric drivetrain. Now, cars sit idle more than 90% of the time, and this presents us with an opportunity to use the battery in an electric car as a way to even out peaks and valleys in electric grid usage, and as a way to store surplus renewable energy for times when it's needed by the grid. Owners of electric cars that are left plugged in when parked could get paid by the utility company for this energy storage service. This concept is called vehicle-to-grid, or V2G. There aren't any cars or grids that have this capability yet, but it's an area of active research. If electric cars were widespread, the storage capacity of their batteries could be several times the generating capacity of the entire grid. We could provide ample storage for excess solar and wind energy from a smart grid connected to smart electric cars. I run my diesel car on fuel my students make from waste vegetable oil. The product they make is called biodiesel, and it can be used as a direct replacement for diesel fuel. Let's take a look at how that process works.
Hi there, my name is Rich Dana, and I'm here today to share some information with you about biodiesel and biofuels. Ethanol is commonly made from corn, and biodiesel is made from a number of different things, but primarily it's made from vegetable oil. It's a super simple process, and I'm just going to show you today just how easy it is to make biodiesel from vegetable oil. And I'm gonna be using just some regular grocery store cooking oil. I'm gonna be using some methanol, which a lot of you probably recognize as a cold weather additive for your car. And I'm gonna be using potassium hydroxide. Potassium hydroxide is a common agricultural fertilizer. It's also known as caustic potash. And you can also use regular lye that's used as a drain cleaner, but we like to use caustic potash because the byproducts are biodegradable and we can compost those when we're done with the processing. So I'm going to show you how we make a catalyst with the methanol and the caustic potash. We're going to add it to the vegetable oil, and you're going to see a chemical reaction that strips away the free fatty acids and breaks down the oil into a diesel fuel that's easier for diesel vehicles to run on. And so what I've done here is I've measured out the potassium hydroxide. I'm going to put this into a mixing vessel, and just to show just how simple the process is, I'm using a regular peanut butter jar. I'm using a household measuring cup, and we're taking 250 milliliters of, and I'm spilling a little bit of it, which is the way it always works, 250 milliliters of the methanol, and we're going to start agitating that and getting the potassium hydroxide to dissolve in the methanol. This is going to be our catalyst for producing the biodiesel. We're going to continue to agitate that until all the potassium is dissolved. It takes a little bit of time, but while the chemical reaction is happening, this is getting warm to the touch. You can tell that there's a pretty serious reaction happening here. This is the most dangerous part of the entire process, is handling that methanol and that caustic potash. So we need to be careful with that. I'm going to set that aside and let that dissolve for a little bit. And in the meantime, I'm using a regular liter bottle here to measure out 1 liter of vegetable oil. And like I said, it can be any kind of vegetable cooking oil. Canola oil is particularly good, soy oil, any of the regular common household oils. So we're going to take that. We're going to use this large mason jar to mix the whole thing. And we're going to put our cooking oil into the mason jar. And to that, we're going to add our catalyst. So now that the potassium hydroxide is completely dissolved in the methanol, we're going to add that catalyst to our vegetable oil. You can see even now it's starting to react with the oil, and it's starting to break it down a little bit. And now I'm going to agitate this, make sure that it's completely mixed and that the oil is getting completely interacted with the catalyst. Because it takes a little while for that chemical reaction to take place, I've prepared some earlier in the day just to show you how the reaction starts to look as the oil starts to break down. Okay, so you can see that the biodiesel has started to clear up, and down here at the bottom you can see a layer of separation between the biodiesel and the byproduct, which is glycerin. And this is a common biodegradable byproduct. It's also commonly used in soaps and cleaners. A lot of you have heard of glycerin. We're able to drain that off the bottom in our larger tanks, and that leaves us with just the biodiesel, and we've got the glycerin byproduct. So essentially, this is what you're buying at the pump when you're buying biodiesel. It's just as simple as that. We've also got some here that was made quite a while ago, and you can see how clear it's gotten. It's really completely clear, and it's gone through what's called a wash process to strip away any of that residual soap or any water or anything else that could be harmful to your injectors or otherwise damaging to your vehicle. This is perfectly safe to put in your diesel vehicle, as good or maybe even better than some of the stuff you'll buy at the pump. So that's in a nutshell, is how biodiesel is made.
There is controversy about using plants for fuel. Most commercially available biofuels are made from corn and soybeans. The plants need to be grown in a sustainable way, and there is potential that biofuels can drive up the price of food. Next, let's consider transportation alternatives based on bikes. The first time I saw a bike system that's a real alternative to cars and public transportation was in 2008 in Paris. The BEAUTYFUll bike sharing program makes bikes ubiquitously available for short-term trips. It's not designed for pleasure riding, although it's a real pleasure to use it. It's a kind of public transportation designed to complement or replace cars and buses, taxis and subways. BEAUTYFUll consists of a network of 20,000 bikes available at curbside locations in all directions all over the city. For 30 euros per year, 8 euros per week, or 1.7 euros per day, you get unlimited use of the system. The first 30 minutes are free. If you go over 30 minutes on a single trip, there are increasingly steep charges to encourage you to use it for short trips. You bike to your destination and return the bike to a ubiquitous curbside station. When you are ready to go on to your next destination, you pick up another bike and repeat the process. Using the bikes is more like getting on and off the metro or bus than using a personal bicycle. The system didn't cost the city of Paris anything. The city doesn't pay for maintenance or operation of the system, and the city gets a payment of 4.3 million euro a year plus all the revenue from the system. Here's how they did it. The system was built and is operated by a Parisian ad agency. In return, they get exclusive use of 1,600 public advertising spaces all over Paris. It's a brilliant concept and hugely popular. As of 2012, the system had 225,000 users, making 173 million trips per year. Motor vehicle traffic has decreased by 25%. It's been copied in other cities in North America. I've used similar public bike systems in Toronto and Montreal. Here's a bike I used in Montreal, loaded down with purchases from the farmers market. I think a team of bright young entrepreneurs could adapt this and roll it out all across America. City road infrastructure was built for cars, but can be adapted for widespread bike usage. This would require working out some new city infrastructure for utility biking as opposed to recreational biking. Things like showers at work, covered bike parking, buses and subways that accommodate bikes, separate traffic signals for bikes, and separate roads for bikes. The best bike infrastructure separates cars from bikes. The provision of separate cycling facilities appears to be one of the keys to the achieving of high levels of cycling in the Netherlands, Denmark, and Germany. Here's an example of an innovative way to arrange a bike lane. Note that instead of the cars parking next to the sidewalk, the bike lane is next to the sidewalk, and the parked cars shield the bike lane from road traffic. In this lecture, we've seen how cities can be transformed into eco-cities. This has to do primarily with design for access by proximity, retrofitting our transportation systems for more foot traffic and bike traffic and less dependence upon cars, powering cities by solar energy, and having a metabolism that includes producing food, recycling waste, and harvesting rainwater. We've looked at energy-efficient cars that use renewable fuels, and we've explored the widespread use of bikes for practical, everyday transportation needs. A key challenge of sustainability is transforming our cities from the least desirable and ecological places to live into the most desirable. Many of these initiatives we need to do collectively. They are beyond the ability of one individual to implement. We need to support the courageous leaders that imagine, create, and advocate for these initiatives. But it's important to know, as individuals, that desirable alternatives exist and to support them when asked.